Hello. I want to give a quick explanation to how I play Gunfire Reborn in the way that I do. Namely, just walking around, target switching, not worrying too much about builds, and more about like just aiming well and things dying. So, first of all, the game mode that I play is something that most people aren't familiar with. They may start this like new adventure thing and then end up in a different mode entirely. This is more of like a traditional roguelike mode, which is very good in its own right, but it's more like, stage based. There's boss battles, things like that, and it's not quite as good for like the aimer stuff that I like to do in this game. So the game mode I play is called Spiritual Assault. This is more of like a zombies mode, or almost like wave based, where they'll just throw enemies at you until either you die or like the final boss dies. You survive for 30 minutes and then the game ends. They kind of feed you upgrades instead of having to go and like find all your upgrades. I want to talk about the build first. How do I do that much damage just by shooting things? The build that I typically go for can be achieved 6 minutes into almost every run, and will usually be enough to win the game if I play well. And it uses a Gemini inscription called Spores. There's some things to explain there if you've never played the game before. Inscriptions are like the modifiers that show up on your weapons, and a Gemini inscription is like a special kind. These ones are like grayed out when you pick them up at first, and the way to activate them is by having both your primary and secondary weapon have the same Gemini inscription. And typically this will make it so you combine the stats of both weapons in some way. So there's one for magazine capacity, one for headshot multiplier, but we're going for one called Spores. So the way that one works is that every time that you hit an enemy with the Spore Gemini, you will start stacking a debuff. And when you hit 30 stacks, you will detonate the Spore debuff and do damage based on the base damage of your weapons. In order to optimize this, we can increase the number of projectiles on our primary and secondary weapons. Because if we have like primary weapon with 5 projectiles, secondary weapon with 5 projectiles, you'll plant 10 spores in one hit. But the easier way to do that is by having your primary weapon be a very fast firing SMG, like the one that I typically use. And then have your secondary weapon be a shotgun. This will make it so that you stack 14 or 15 spores per shot, and every 2 shots, basically, you're going to detonate them. This will make it so you're just pumping out spore procs constantly. And if you have your spores scale with you as you progress through the game, you basically don't have to worry about anything else in terms of your offensive potential. The best shotguns to use for this are the Hell and the Argus. Both of these have the highest pellet count to base damage ratio, and will let you proc spores really often. Secondary option would be Wild Hunt. Is not terrible, pretty good base damage, much lower projectiles, but it's definitely a good stand-in until you get one of the other two. And then the other ones like the Porcupine or the Wheel Saw, they're like okay, but I wouldn't go out of my way to use them. Just pretty much if you can't get any of the other options, like those will do better than just some other random weapon you find on the ground, just because it's a shotgun. And in order to keep up with the scaling of the game, typically you will just go for shotgun upgrades the whole time. Just have your spores scale, and then have your base weapon be like a spore applicator as opposed to being like a main damage dealer. If you have a weapon that is like really crazy as your primary weapon, you probably could go for a more balanced distribution of levels, or maybe just upgrade that to begin with. But the spore build is really consistent if you just have like a level 30 Argus by the end of the game. Yeah, and this is so good for my kind of playstyle because you basically will have infinite ammo, run fast, and kill things pretty quickly. That lets you just focus on the aim and the dodging and like nothing else. You don't have to worry about like your ability usage or like running out of ammo or anything like that. You will most likely keep up with the pacing of the game and just, focus on killing stuff. If you play the normal mode, you can unlock this thing called etching in the skill tree. In Spiritual Assault, you will get this ability through the Spiritual Concentrator. So the way that etching works is that it will add an extra inscription to whatever gun that you use it with. But you can get Gemini inscriptions with it sometimes. The conditions for getting Gemini inscriptions are either already having 4 inscriptions on your weapon when you click etch, or having it be level 5. So the second one is important because if you want to get a spore setup going by 6 minutes, you will probably have to use a weapon that only has 2, 3, or even 1 inscription and get that to level 5 before you hit edge. Sometimes you have to do that with both weapons, so it's important to like divvy up the upgrades that the game gives you in order to get spores as fast as possible. So for the character, I will almost always play the bunny in Spiritual Assault because of a few reasons. The main one is her ability to maintain infinite ammo. So she's got 2 skills, Warlike Blade and Ammo Extractor. Ammo Extractor on its own can kind of give you infinite ammo, depending on how fast your weapon fires and how big your magazine is. Every time you kill an enemy, it gives half of your magazine refunded, and it also increases your damage. This is really, really good, because when you're killing enemies that fast with spores, you can basically just target switch and have infinite ammo with one single upgrade, which is crazy. Warlike Blade can give you a little bit of a buffer in terms of your ammo consumption, but the main benefit here is the rate of fire and the accuracy. A lot of guns just aren't accurate enough to be viable for this kind of build, but with Warlike Blade you can make them really precise and much more usable. Secondary reason to use the bunny is her hero-specific talents. So, as you progress through the skill tree, you can also upgrade whatever hero you're currently playing with these permanent upgrades. And the main ones that stand out to me are Galloping Speed. For each enemy you kill, 10% movement speed for 8 seconds. This one will kind of carry your movement speed. I tried playing one of the new characters when they came out a few days ago, and it was like painfully slow. Because this is just a permanent 50% increase in movement speed. Like, that's a huge deal. And it's enough to like always feel like I can dodge whatever the game throws at me in Spiritual Assault. The secondary benefits are there's a magazine size one here, and also Resilient Shield, where it will just start giving you more defense whenever you kill stuff, which in Spiritual Assault happens pretty often. So how do I go so fast? This is I would say the main reason is bunny. Galloping speed, it makes a huge difference for your movement speed, but also my FOV is 130. This makes it look like I'm going a lot faster than I actually am. And then after that, it would just be scrolls. So the main scrolls that typically give me enough movement speed to be going like super fast by the end of the game are Abnormal Speed, Ostrich Rider, and to an extent, Decay Driver and Improved Clip. So Abnormal Speed is a scroll that will scale your speed with your shields. So if you have ways of generating shields, or if you have paranormality, then it'll just be zooming, basically. Really, really good scroll, and it is gettable almost every game because it's a common, I'm pretty sure. Ostrich Rider, a bit less common, bit less frequently you'll have this in every run, but this can also carry your movement speed on its own. I have Snow Boots in here as well, because the main ways that I die in runs are if I get hit by something from a Kappa or an Umbrella Spirit, I'll get slowed to the point of getting like chain stunned and killed. But having slow immunity is really helpful. Decay Driver is a nice little additional movement speed bonus if I am using a Dual Fang, but it's not always applicable. And then Strategic Advantage is also one of those like nice to have ones. If you are dashing a lot, it'll just have a bit of a nice movement speed benefit. So let's talk about the ammo scrolls now. A lot of the times, especially if you're using something like the Angelic Aura, your Ascensions aren't going to be enough to carry your infinite ammo on its own. So you'll have to support that with a few scrolls. In my opinion, the best scroll for this is Against the Flow. Unfortunately, for guns like the Angelic Aura, it probably isn't enough to give you infinite ammo on its own. But for things like the Dual Fang or like the Laser Gloves, it will be. Just a single scroll is enough to give you infinite ammo. You never have to think about it again. It's really, really good. There's no downside. I don't know, just an insanely broken scroll for how common it is. And then there's also Advanced Depot. This one will use your reserve ammo instead of your magazine ammo to fire, which means that you can never have to reload in some ways, but it's not quite infinite ammo. If you don't have ways of generating enough ammo to support that playstyle, then you'll probably run out of reserve ammo and still run out of ammo. However, if you do have enough, it's just as good as Against the Flow. I have Deft Hands in A tier. because this is another one that will give you infinite ammo every time you kill an enemy, which is insane. But I'm pretty sure that when you have this active, it does not count as consuming ammo. And for the bunny, that's kind of a problem. So it will make it so your spore build is better, but will lower your overall damage potential if you have this thing. Then there's also Genesis. This one will give you like a 10% chance to refund your ammo every time you fire, which isn't great, but it can be like the final push you need for infinite ammo for finding out you're occasionally running out. And generally just makes things a little bit smoother, especially in the early game if you get this. And then improved clip plus bullet bank is a decent like stand-in option for ways to have ammo be put into your magazine. But it's not really a primary means of maintaining infinite ammo. Just like fast loader, this one will make it so if you quickly weapon swap, you can get your weapon to reload. It's just okay. It's better than reloading manually most of the time, but I just like never remember to do it. Bloody ammo is a very situational one. If you have like a flesh and bones lifesteal build or just a ton of shield generation from your build, bloody ammo can kind of carry your ammo on its own. But for the most part, you'll be looking for infinite ammo in the early game, and this one will usually not be sustainable. One of the benefits of the Spore build is the fact that you do not have to base your entire playstyle around it. It's more of like a, okay, now that my main offense and weapon selection is covered, what do I do now? And pretty much any build that would work normally will still work with this setup. So like for the bunny, you could go the Blade of Bloom build, or you could go for the Swords Out builds, where you get a ton of benefits for pressing your main ability, a ton of lucky shot, ton of like extra damage. So yeah, all of these will still work with the Spore build, and how you build it is really up to how you feel like playing or like what the game gives you. And the same can be true for the scrolls that you get. I'm not going to get into every scroll in the game and like put it in a tier list or anything. That's something you can learn with time and just like try stuff out, see what sounds good and take it. But speaking of offense, there's also the consideration of which spiritual goblets to get. So twice in the game you get these character upgrades that you have to spend your spiritual essence for. And first of all, I wouldn't do this until you have like maxed out your skill tree. Unless you really just like don't care about that and just want to target switch, then that's fine, I guess. But pretty much every game, the first one I will take is swordsmanship. Bunny already has ways of rewarding ammo consumption through her primary skill and even her secondary skill. But swordsmanship will take that a step further and give you bonus weapon damage just for shooting a lot. So really good value for just playing how you already would anyway. For the second goblet that you get, I don't have just an exact answer as to which goblet is second best. If you have good enough defense, it would be a glass cannon. But if you don't, then you could go for like the weapons expert one, or like the elemental prohibition's probably okay. Maybe well-trained could be decent too. Like there's a few things that are just like nice upgrades, but not huge benefits. For defense, the main things you should be looking for is ways to generate swords for Sword Guard. Sword Guard is like an insanely broken skill with everything else the bunny has going on. Because you will just generate an absurd amount of shields if you have your systems working. So that can be either on your primary skill, your secondary skill, or empathy with the sword. Having Sword Guard proc and generate you shield will keep you alive really, really well. But I think that's basically it. It's worth noting that if you don't want to go for spores, or if you're having a really hard time not reloading every 2 seconds, you could go for a magazine-based build as well, where there's one that's like a weapon 1 and 2 share magazine capacity, and then you get a benefit for not reloading as well. That one is not bad, and I've finished runs with that before, but the quality of your build will matter a little bit more than the spores. So it's really good if you want to use like an angelic aura. You got only against the flow, and you have to reload every 2 seconds anyway. Get like a secondary weapon that has a ton of reserve ammo or a ton of magazine capacity. Add the magazine Gemini, and like you're probably chilling for a while. In Spiritual Assault, you can like equip skills before you get into a game, and I have mostly craftsman related upgrades. First one being Legendary Craftsman, the ability to etch in the first place. Then I have Craftsman Inheritor, which is free upgrades. Technically, it gives you a weapon debuff when you have a ton of scrolls, but I haven't really thought about it in a while. I used to like count the number and get rid of them, but now I don't know, I'm too lazy. And then +1 total enhancements of the Craftsman. This will let you get your +2 weapon to +5 by 6 minutes. Everything else is kind of like flavor, kind of preferential, but I'll go through the ones that I've picked anyway. So my 2x2 here is target marked, 15% enemy damage taken for 5 seconds upon dealing a crit hit, and this one is a nice to have one. Mostly because I like having headshots be rewarded a little bit more. One of the few downsides of the Spore build is that it doesn't really require you to hit headshots. So having my damage scale when I do hit a headshot is nice. It feels more rewarding this way. But if you wanted to go for something else, like the double jump, you definitely could, and you could get away with it for sure. So my one tile upgrades here are SMG Scavenger and Shotgun Scavenger. These are just kind of guaranteeing that I'll have at least a shotgun by the end of the first 6 minutes, and hopefully a decent SMG, namely dual firing. There is Total Recovery, which is just to aid the early game. So a lot of the times in the early game, you'll run out of ammo quite often and then have to just like use your pistol. I like having this as a way to give myself my reserve ammo back every time I level up, and usually that'll only happen never or once before 6 minutes. And then Stronger Arrow, plus 3% weapon damage every time you level up. I don't know how much this actually does, but it sounds good, so I have it here. But yeah, that's basically it for the way that I play. The rest is just aim good, dodge good, win game. Thanks for watching.